You do not belong here." The words cut through the ceremonial hall like a blade, and every head turned toward the source. Alara felt her breath catch in her throat as Lady Vivian's perfectly manicured finger pointed directly at her, the accusation hanging in the air like poison. The ritual of the blood moon had barely begun, and already Alara knew she had made a terrible mistake by attending. She was a servant, an orphan without a wolf, without a family name, without any right to stand among the noble daughters and high-ranking pack members who had gathered to witness the Alpha King choose his Luna. But the old cook, Martha, had insisted. She had pressed Alara's only decent dress into her hands and told her that every unmated female in the territory was required to attend. No exceptions, not even for kitchen staff. Now, standing in the grand hall with its soaring ceilings and walls covered in ancient tapestries, depicting the glory of the Silverwood pack, Alara wished she had refused. She wished she had hidden in the root cellar or pretended to be ill. Anything to avoid this moment of being seen, of being noticed, of being singled out by the one woman who had made her life miserable for years. "I said, you do not belong here," Vivian repeated, her voice louder now, carrying to every corner of the hall. She moved through the crowd, with the grace of someone who had never doubted her place in the world, her silver gown shimmering under the light of 1,000 candles. Her dark hair was piled high on her head, woven through with moonstones that caught the light, and her eyes, cold and calculating, never left Alara's face. "This ceremony is for wolves of standing, for daughters of noble houses, for females worthy of being considered as the Alpha King's mate. It is not for orphaned servants who steal from their betters." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Alara took a step backward, her hand instinctively moving to the small leather pouch that hung around her neck, hidden beneath the modest neckline of her dress. Inside that pouch was the talisman, the only thing her mother had left her before dying in childbirth. It was a smooth stone, no bigger than her thumb, with strange markings carved into its surface that seemed to shift and change depending on how the light hit them. Alara had treasured it her entire life, had kept it close to her heart even when she had nothing else, not even a memory of the woman who had given it to her. "I have stolen nothing," Alara said, her voice shakier than she would have liked. She hated how small she sounded, how afraid. Around her, the other females whispered and stared, their expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. None of them would defend her. Why would they? She was nobody to them, less than nobody. She was the girl who scrubbed their floors and served their meals, who existed in the background of their lives like a piece of furniture they barely noticed. "That talisman belongs to the royal bloodline," Vivian continued, moving closer, her eyes fixed on the small bulge beneath Alara's dress where the pouch rested against her skin. "My father, the Supreme Counselor, has records that prove it. It was lost 3 generations ago, when the lunar lineage was wiped out in the Great Betrayal. How did a servant girl come to possess such a treasure? Unless you stole it from the royal vaults, or perhaps found it among the ruins where your kind scavenged for scraps." The hall had gone, completely silent now. Even the musicians who had been playing soft melodies in the corner had stopped, their instruments quiet. Alara felt hundreds of eyes on her, judging her, condemning her without even knowing the truth. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that her mother had owned the talisman, that it was all she had left of a family she had never known. But the words stuck in her throat. What was the point? No one would believe her. No one ever believed orphans and servants. They were the lowest of the low, barely considered part of the pack at all, tolerated only because someone needed to do the work that the nobles considered beneath them. "Show me," Vivienne demanded, holding out her hand. "Show everyone here what you are hiding, and let us see if you are a thief as well as an intruder." Alara's hand closed around the pouch protectively. The thought of giving it up, of letting Vivian's cold fingers touch the one thing that connected her to her mother, made her feel physically ill. But what choice did she have? Vivian was the daughter of the Supreme Counselor, one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. She had the weight of nobility and authority behind her, while Alara had nothing but her word, which counted for exactly nothing in this world. She was about to reach for the leather cord around her neck when a voice cut through the tension like thunder. What is the meaning of this disruption? Every person in the hall immediately dropped into a bow or curtsy, their heads lowered in submission. Ilara followed suit automatically, her body responding to years of training even as her mind reeled. She did not need to look up to know who had entered. She could feel his presence like a physical force, could smell the scent of pine and steel that marked him as the Alpha King. Theron Blackstone, the warrior king who had united 3 warring packs under his rule, who had defended the borders against rogue attacks for a decade, who had never taken a mate because, it was whispered, no female had ever been worthy of standing at his side. Ilara had seen him only a handful of times in her life, always from a distance, always as a figure of legend, rather than a real man. Now he was here, in the same room, and she did not dare lift her eyes to look at him. Your Majesty. Vivian's voice had taken on a honeyed quality, sweet and deferential. I apologize for the disturbance. I was merely pointing out that a servant has entered the ceremony hall, and worse, she carries an item that belongs to the royal treasury. I thought it best to address the matter before the ritual began, so that no dishonor would taint the sacred proceedings. There was a long pause. Ilara could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could feel sweat beading on the back of her neck despite the cool air in the hall. She kept her eyes fixed on the polished marble floor, on her own worn shoes that looked so out of place among the elegant slippers and boots of the other attendees. Rise, the Alpha King commanded, and his voice was not what Ilara had expected. It was deep, yes, and carried the unmistakable weight of authority, but there was something else beneath it, something that made her skin prickle with awareness. All of you, rise and let me see what accusation is being made. Ilara straightened slowly, her gaze still downcast. She could see him now in her peripheral vision, a tall figure dressed in black leather and silver armor, his dark hair tied, back from a face that was all hard angles and sharp edges. He looked like what he was, a warrior who had seen too much death, who carried the weight of an entire kingdom on his shoulders. His eyes, she noticed, were scanning the crowd, moving from face to face until they landed on her. The moment their gazes met, something happened that Ilara could not explain. It was as if the air between them crackled with electricity, as if every nerve in her body suddenly came alive. She felt a pull, deep in. Her chest, like an invisible thread connecting her to him. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once, and she did not understand it at all. She did not have a wolf, had never experienced the mate bond that other wolves described, so this sensation made no sense. Yet it was there, undeniable and overwhelming, making it impossible to look away from him, even though every instinct told her she should lower her eyes in submission. Theron's expression did not change, but something flickered in. His dark eyes, something that might have been surprise or recognition or confusion. He stared at her for a long moment, long enough that the silence became uncomfortable, before finally turning his attention to Vivian. You claim this woman has stolen from the royal treasury? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. I do, Your Majesty, Vivian said, moving to stand beside him with the familiarity of someone who believed she had every right to be there. She was beautiful, Ilara had to admit, with her perfect features and regal bearing. She looked like a queen already, like she had been born to wear a crown. The talisman she carries is described in the old records. It bears the mark of the lunar lineage, the bloodline that was extinguished 3 generations ago. Such an artifact should be in the royal vaults, protected and preserved as part of our history. Yet this servant girl wears it around her neck, as if it were a common trinket. I can only conclude that she either stole it, or purchased it from someone who did. Is this true? Theron asked, his gaze returning to Ilara. Do you possess such an item? Ilara's throat was so dry she could barely speak. I have a talisman, Your Majesty, she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. But I did not steal it. It was my mother's. She left it to me when she died giving birth to me. It is all I have of her, all I have of any family." She saw something shift in his expression, a softening that was there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Show me," he said, and it was not a request. With trembling fingers, Alara reached beneath the neckline of her dress and pulled out the leather pouch. She opened it carefully, tipping the talisman into her palm. The stone caught the candlelight, its surface seeming to glow with an inner luminescence. The markings carved into it were intricate and beautiful, swirling patterns that reminded her of wind and water and the phases of the moon. She had spent countless hours as a child tracing those patterns with her fingertips, wondering what they meant, wondering who her mother had been to own such a thing. Vivian gasped, a theatrical sound that drew everyone's attention. "You see? It is exactly as the records describe. The lunar talisman, lost since the massacre at Moonhaven. This girl has no right to possess it." Theron stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Alara. He was even more imposing up close, tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to see his face, broad-shouldered and muscular in a way that spoke of a lifetime of training and combat. But it was his scent that overwhelmed her, that made her wolf, the wolf she did not have and never would, seemed to stir somewhere deep inside her consciousness. It made no sense. Nothing about this made any sense. "May I?" he asked, holding out his hand. For a moment, Alara wanted to refuse. The talisman was hers, the only connection she had to a past she did not. Remember, to a mother she had never known. But refusing the Alpha King was not an option, not for someone like her. She placed the stone in his palm, trying not to notice how warm his skin was, how the brief contact of their fingers made that strange pulling sensation in her chest intensify. Theron examined the talisman closely, turning it over in his hand. His expression was unreadable, but Alara thought she saw his jaw tighten, saw the muscles in his neck tense. "Where did your mother get this?" he asked, his eyes still on the stone. "I do not know, Your Majesty," Alara admitted. "I never knew her. The woman who raised me, Martha in the kitchens, found me as an infant with only this talisman and a name. My mother died shortly after I was born. No one knew who she was or where she came from. Martha took me in out of kindness, gave me work when I was old enough, and never asked questions about the talisman. It was the truth, the simple, painful truth of her existence. She was nobody, from nowhere, with no family and no past. The talisman was the only evidence that she had ever been anything more than an unwanted burden." "This is convenient," Vivian said, her voice dripping with skepticism. "A mysterious dead mother, no witnesses, no proof of anything except that this girl possesses an artifact that does not belong to her. Your Majesty, I urge you to confiscate the talisman and place it where it belongs in the royal vaults. As for the girl, she should be punished. For theft and for daring to enter this sacred ceremony when she has no wolf, no rank, and no business being here." The words stung, each one a reminder of everything Alara was not, everything she would never be. She was a servant, a nobody, a girl without even a wolf to call her own. In a world where wolves were everything, where they defined your worth and your place in society, being wolfless was the ultimate shame. She had learned to live with it, to accept her place at the bottom of the hierarchy, but hearing it stated so bluntly in front of the entire court, in front of the Alpha King himself, made her want to disappear into the floor. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The Alpha King's hand closed around the talisman, his fingers curling over the stone until it was hidden from view. For a long moment, he said nothing, and the silence in the hall was suffocating. Then slowly, he turned to face Vivian. "The punishment for false accusation is severe, Lady Vivian," he said quietly. "Are you certain you wish to pursue this claim?" Vivian's confidence wavered for just a second before she recovered. "I am certain, Your Majesty. The records are clear. This talisman is royal property, and this girl has no legitimate claim to it." Theron nodded, as if he had expected this answer. Then he turned back to Alara, and what he did next shocked everyone in the hall, including Alara herself. He held out the talisman toward her. "If this is truly yours by right of inheritance," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "then you will not fear proving it. The sacred flame of the blood moon ritual burns before us. It is said that the fire recognizes truth, that it reveals what is hidden. Place your talisman in the flames. If you are a thief, the stone will be consumed. If you are telling the truth, if this talisman truly belongs to you by blood right, the fire will reveal it." Alara stared at him, her mind racing. He was giving her a choice, but it was not really a choice at all. If she refused, she would be admitting guilt, would be branded a thief, and possibly thrown into the dungeons or worse. If she accepted, she risked losing the only possession she had ever cared about, the only link to her mother. But there was something in his eyes, something that looked almost like belief, like he wanted her to take the chance. She did not understand why. The Alpha King would care whether a servant girl was telling the truth. But she found herself nodding, found herself reaching for the talisman even though her hands were shaking. "I will do it," she said. And her voice was stronger now, steadier. "I have nothing to hide." She turned toward the sacred fire that burned in the center of the hall, housed in a massive stone brazier that had been used for ceremonies since the founding of the Silverwood Pack. The flames were already burning high, fed by ancient woods and herbs that gave them a silvery quality, appropriate for a blood moon ritual. The heat from the fire washed over her as she approached, making her skin prickle with sweat. Alara looked down at the talisman in her hand one last time. The stone seemed to pulse with warmth, as if it were alive, as if it were trying to tell her something. She thought of her mother, the woman she had never known, the woman who had left her this one precious thing. If the fire consumed it, she would have nothing left. No connection to the past. No hope of ever knowing where she came from. But if the fire proved her claim, if it showed everyone that she was telling the truth, then maybe, just maybe, she would finally have something that nobody could take away from her. Respect. Dignity. Proof that she mattered. She took a deep breath, whispered a silent prayer to whatever gods might be listening, and threw the talisman into the flames. The stone arced through the air, tumbling end over, end catching the light as it fell. It hit the heart of the fire with a soft sound, and for a moment, nothing happened. The flames continued to burn silver and white, crackling softly, consuming the sacred woods as they had been doing all evening. Alara felt her heart sink. The talisman was gone, burned to ash, and with it went any proof that she had been telling the truth. Vivian would have her arrested, would see her thrown out of the pack or worse, and there would be nothing Alara could do to stop it. But then the fire changed. It started as a subtle shift in color, the silver flames taking on a golden tinge at their edges. Then the gold spread, moving through the fire like liquid sunlight, until the entire brazier blazed with golden light so bright it hurt to look at directly. The hall erupted in gasps and exclamations, people stumbling backward, shielding their eyes from the brilliant glow. The flames rose higher, reaching toward the vaulted ceiling, and in their heart, Alara could see the talisman, not burning, not consumed, but glowing with the same golden light as the fire around it. The markings on its surface were no longer subtle swirls and patterns. They were blazing with power, clearly visible even from a distance, and they were moving, shifting, rearranging themselves into a symbol that Alara did not recognize, but somehow felt she should know. It was ancient, and powerful, and beautiful. A crescent moon cradled within a sun, surrounded by stars that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. And then the pain hit. It started in Alara's chest, right over her heart, a burning sensation that made her cry out and press her hand to her sternum. The pain spread outward, racing down her arm, across her shoulder, until it concentrated in one spot on her inner forearm. She looked down and watched in horror and fascination as her skin began to glow with the same golden light as the fire. The light grew brighter, hotter, and then suddenly it was not just light anymore. It was a mark, burning itself into her flesh, searing itself into her very bones. The pain was excruciating, worse than anything she had ever experienced, and she heard herself screaming even as she tried to stay on her feet. Her vision blurred, darkened at the edges, and she thought she might pass out. But through the pain, through the confusion and fear, she felt something else. Power. Raw, untamed power flooding through her veins like liquid fire. It was terrifying and glorious all at once, awakening something inside her that had been sleeping, dormant, waiting for this moment. When the light finally faded, when the pain receded to a dull throb, Alara looked down at her arm. There, burned into her skin in lines of silver that seemed to shimmer with their own light, was the same symbol she had seen in the flames. The crescent moon within the sun, surrounded by stars. It was beautiful and terrible, a mark that proclaimed something she did not understand, something that made the entire hall fall into a shocked, terrified silence. She looked up, trying to make sense of what had just happened, trying to understand why everyone was staring at her with expressions that ranged from awe to horror. Her gaze found the Alpha King, and what she saw on his face made her breath catch for the second time that evening. He had pulled back the sleeve of his shirt, revealing his own inner forearm, and there, burned into his skin in the exact same lines of shimmering silver, was an identical mark. The same crescent moon within the sun, the same stars, the same ancient symbol of a bloodline that was supposed to be extinct. Theron stared at her, and in his eyes, she saw recognition, shock, and something that might have been fear or desire or both. The lunar mark, someone whispered, and the words were picked up and repeated throughout the hall, growing louder, more frantic. The lunar lineage. She bears the mark of the lost bloodline. Vivian's voice cut through the chaos, high and sharp with disbelief. This is not possible. The lunar lineage was wiped out. There are no heirs. This must be some trick, some deception. But the Alpha King was not listening to her. He was moving toward Alara, closing the distance between them with purposeful strides. When he reached her, he took her arm, his fingers wrapping around her wrist, with surprising gentleness. He held their marked arms side by side, comparing them, and Alara could see that the symbols were not just similar. They were identical, perfect mirrors of each other, glowing with the same silvery light. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. Who was your mother? Theron asked, his voice rough, strained, as if the words were being torn from him against his will. What was her name? Alara shook her head, unable to form words. Her mind was reeling, trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand what this mark meant, why it matched his, why. Everyone was looking at her like she had just transformed into something other than human. I do not know, she finally managed to say. Martha never told me. She said my mother died before she could say anything, before she could explain who she was, or where she came from. I have been searching for answers my entire life, but there were none to find. Theron's grip on her wrist tightened, not painfully, but firmly, as if he were afraid she might disappear if he let go. The lunar mark only appears on those of pure lunar bloodline, he said, and he was not speaking just to her anymore. He was addressing the entire hall, his voice carrying the weight of authority and finality. It is the mark of true royalty, of the line that ruled before the great betrayal, before the massacre at Moonhaven. It cannot be faked, cannot be forged, cannot be given to someone unworthy. The sacred fire has spoken. This woman is no servant. She is a princess of the lunar lineage, the last of her line, and she bears the mate mark that binds her to me. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Mate. The word echoed through Alara's mind, refusing to make sense. She did not have a wolf. She could not have a mate. The mate bond required a wolf to recognize its other half, and she had never shifted, had never felt the presence of a wolf inside her consciousness. It was impossible. Yet the mark on her arm proclaimed otherwise, and the pull she felt toward the Alpha King, the inexplicable attraction and connection that had struck her the moment their eyes met, suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. "No," Vivian said, her voice breaking through Alara's shock. "No, this cannot be. Your Majesty, you cannot possibly accept this. She is nobody, nothing. A servant who has lived her entire life in obscurity. Even if she does carry some trace of the lunar bloodline, she is not fit to be your Luna. She has no training, no education, no understanding of court politics or how to rule. Choosing her would be a disaster for the kingdom." She was saying everything that Alara herself was thinking, all the reasons why this was wrong, why it could not possibly work. But Theron's expression had turned cold, his eyes fixed on Vivian with an intensity that made her step back involuntarily. "Are you questioning the will of the sacred fire?" he asked quietly. "Are you suggesting that I ignore a mate bond ordained by fate itself?" Vivian opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "I am saying that there are considerations beyond fate, Your Majesty. Political considerations. Strategic considerations. The kingdom needs a Luna who can navigate the complexities of court, who has alliances and connections, who can strengthen your position rather than weaken it. This girl, whoever she is, cannot offer any of that." It was a reasonable argument, Alara had to admit. Everything Vivian said was true. Alara had no idea how to be a Luna, how to be anything other than a servant. The thought of standing beside the Alpha King, of making decisions that affected the entire kingdom, was so far beyond her understanding that it felt like a cruel joke. She should speak up, should tell them all that Vivian was right, that this was a mistake. But before she could find her voice, Theron spoke again. "The lunar lineage was the most powerful bloodline in the history of our kind," he said, his words deliberate and measured. "They were not just rulers. They were protectors, warriors, healers. Their blood carried magic that has been lost for 3 generations. Magic that could turn the tide of wars, that could heal wounds no healer could touch, that could forge bonds between packs that nothing else could create. If this woman truly carries that blood, if she is the last heir of that lineage, then she is not weak. She is the most valuable person in this kingdom, more valuable than any political alliance or strategic marriage could ever be." He turned to look at Alara, and the intensity in his gaze made her feel like he could see straight through her, past all her fears and doubts to something deeper, something she did not even know existed. "The mark does not lie," he said softly. "The sacred fire does not make mistakes. You are my mate, and you are a princess of the lunar bloodline. Whether you knew it or not, whether you believe it or not, that is the truth." Alara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, but the mark on her arm was still glowing faintly, still pulsing with warmth, and she could feel something stirring inside her, something that had been dormant her entire life. It was faint, barely a whisper, but it was there. A presence. A consciousness that was not her own but was part of her, intrinsically connected to her. A wolf. Her wolf. The wolf she had never had, never thought she would have. It was waking up, drawn out by the power of the mark, by the recognition of its mate, by the truth of her bloodline finally being revealed. Ethion. Sensation was overwhelming, disorienting, like suddenly discovering she had an entire sense she had been missing her whole life. She gasped, stumbling backward, and Theron caught her, his hands steady on her shoulders. "Breathe," he commanded, his voice cutting through her panic. "Your wolf is waking. It will be disorienting at first, but you need to breathe through it. Do not fight it." Alara tried to follow his instructions, tried to slow her racing heart and calm her spinning thoughts. The presence of her wolf grew stronger, more defined, and with it came a flood of sensations. She could smell things she had never noticed before, could hear the whispered conversations happening at the far edges of the hall, could feel the heartbeats of everyone around her like drums pounding in her ears. It was too much, too fast, and she did not know how to process it all. "She needs time," Theron said, addressing someone behind him. "The awakening is always difficult, but for someone who has lived this long without their wolf, it will be especially hard. She needs to be taken somewhere quiet, somewhere safe, where she can adjust without an audience." Ilara felt herself being lifted, felt strong arms cradling her against a broad chest. The scent of pine and steel surrounded her, anchoring her, giving her something to focus on besides the overwhelming chaos of new sensations. She looked up and found herself staring into Theron's eyes, dark and intense, and filled with something she could not quite name. Concern? Possessiveness? Whatever it was, it made her feel safer than she had any right to feel, given everything that was happening. "I have you," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "I will not let anything happen to you. You are mine to protect now, whether you accept it or not." The words should have sounded arrogant, presumptuous even, but coming from him, spoken in that low, intense tone, they sounded like a vow, like a promise that he intended to keep no matter what. Obstacles stood in his way. Ilara wanted to protest, wanted to insist that she did not need protection, but the truth was she had never needed it more. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about her place in the world, had just been shattered. She was not a nobody. She was not just a servant. She was a princess, a mate, someone with a destiny that terrified her, even as it called to something deep inside her soul. As Theron carried her from the hall, Ilara caught one last glimpse of Vivian's face. The other woman's expression was twisted with rage and hatred, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Ilara saw a promise there, a silent vow that this was not over, that Vivian would not give up her claim to the throne without a fight. It should have frightened her. Perhaps it should have made her want to run, to give up this impossible destiny and return to the safety of anonymity. But as her newly awakened wolf stirred inside her consciousness, as she felt the mate bond humming between herself and the Alpha King, Ilara realized something surprising. She did not want to run. For the first time in her life, she wanted to fight. She wanted to claim what was hers, to step into the destiny that had been waiting for her all along. She was done being invisible, done being dismissed and overlooked. The fire had revealed the truth, and there was no going back from it now. Theron carried her through corridors. She had walked 1,000 times as a servant, but had never truly seen. Everything looked different now, felt different, as if she were viewing the world through new eyes. Perhaps she was. Her wolf was showing her things she had never noticed before, subtle details and hidden patterns that had always been there, but that she had lacked the senses to perceive. She could smell the fear and anxiety emanating from the guards they passed, could hear their hearts racing as they bowed to their Alpha King, and tried not to stare at the woman in his arms. They all knew what had happened. News would be spreading through the pack like wildfire, and by morning, everyone would know that the orphan servant girl was actually a princess, that she bore the mate mark of the Alpha King, that the lunar lineage was not extinct after all. Theron pushed open a heavy wooden door with his shoulder and carried her into what was clearly his personal chambers. The room was large but surprisingly sparse, decorated, more for function than comfort. There was a massive bed against one wall, a desk covered in maps and documents, weapons mounted on the walls, and a fireplace that was currently dark and cold. He set her down gently on the bed, then stepped back, putting distance between them as if he did not quite trust himself to stay close. "How do you feel?" he asked, his eyes scanning her face with an intensity that made her nervous. "Overwhelmed," Ilara admitted. There seemed to be no point in lying. Not when everything about her life had just changed irrevocably. "Confused, terrified. I do not understand what is happening to me, what any of this means." Theron nodded, as if he had expected this answer. Your wolf was suppressed, he said, moving to pour water from a pitcher into a glass. He brought it to her, waiting until she took it before continuing. Deliberately, I would guess, though I do not know how or why. The lunar bloodline is powerful, but with that power comes danger. Someone wanted to keep you hidden, wanted to make sure you never awakened to your true nature. The talisman must have been part of that suppression, a seal of some kind that kept your wolf dormant while also preserving your heritage. Ilara sipped the water, her mind trying to process his words. My mother, she said slowly. You think she suppressed my wolf deliberately? Why would she do that? To protect you, Theron said simply. The lunar lineage was hunted to extinction after the Great Betrayal. Someone within the royal court orchestrated the massacre at Moonhaven, killed every member of the bloodline they could find. Your mother must have survived, must have gone into hiding while she was pregnant with you. She would have known that if your true nature was discovered, you would be hunted and killed. So she suppressed your wolf, gave you the talisman as a key to unlock your heritage when the time was right, and then died, taking her secrets with her. It made a terrible kind of sense. Ilara had always wondered why her mother had abandoned her, why she had left her with nothing but a stone and a name. But if Theron was right, if her mother had been fleeing for her life, trying to protect her daughter from an enemy who wanted their entire bloodline extinct, then dying in childbirth must have been a final, desperate sacrifice. She had given Ilara life, and then given her anonymity, hoping it would be enough to keep her safe. Who would want to kill my entire family? Ilara asked, her voice shaking. Who could hate us so much that they would hunt down every last person who carried our blood? Theron's expression darkened, his jaw clenching. That is the question I have been trying to answer for years, he said. The official story is that the lunar bloodline betrayed the crown, that they were plotting to overthrow the established order and seize power for themselves. The massacre at Moonhaven was supposedly justified, a necessary evil to prevent civil war. But I never believed that story. The lunar line was loyal, honorable. They had no reason to betray anyone. Someone wanted them dead and fabricated a reason to make it happen. He turned away from her, staring into the cold fireplace as if seeing something beyond the present moment. My father was involved in the massacre, he said quietly. He led the forces that attacked Moonhaven, that burned it to the ground and killed everyone inside. He told me it was his duty, that he was following the orders of the Supreme Council, that the lunar line had to be eliminated for the good of the kingdom. I was barely more than a boy at the time, but I remember the screams, remember the smell of smoke and blood, remember the way he looked when he came home, like he had done something that could never be undone. Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. Your father killed my family, she said, and the words felt heavy, loaded with implications she did not want to examine. Does that mean you are my enemy too? Theron turned back to face her, and the intensity in his eyes was almost painful to witness. I am your mate, he said flatly. The mate bond does not care about politics or history or the sins of our fathers. It exists, whether we want it to or not, whether it is convenient or not. I cannot change what my father did, cannot undo the massacre or bring your family back. But I can promise you this. I will find out who orchestrated the betrayal, who ordered the deaths of innocents, and I will make them pay for what they did. And I will protect you with my life, because you are mine, and I do not fail to protect what is mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have bothered her. She barely knew this man, barely understood what being mates meant. But her newly awakened wolf responded to his words, rising up inside her consciousness with a fierce approval. Mate, it whispered, the word carrying layers of meaning and instinct that Ilara did not fully comprehend. Strong, protective, ours. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. The moment was broken by a sharp knock on the door. Theron's expression shifted instantly, his body tensing, moving between Ilara and the door with the unconscious instinct of a warrior. What is it? He called out, his voice hard. Your Majesty, the Supreme Counselor requests an immediate audience. A voice answered from the other side of the door. He says it is a matter of utmost urgency regarding the events in the ceremonial hall. Theron's eyes met Alara's, and she saw the conflict there. He did not want to leave her, did not want to let her out of his sight, but duty was calling. Tell him I will meet him in the council chambers in 10 minutes, he said finally. Post guards outside this door. No one enters except me or the royal physician. No one. Is that understood? There was a chorus of affirmatives from the hallway. Theron turned back to Alara, his expression softening slightly. I need to deal with the council, he said. They will have questions, concerns, probably demands. The revelation of your existence, of your heritage, changes the political landscape of the entire kingdom. I need to manage that before it spirals out of control. What should I do? Alara asked, feeling helpless and lost. Everything was happening so fast, too fast for her to keep up. An hour ago, she had been a servant hoping to simply survive the ritual without being noticed. Now she was a princess, a mate, someone with a wolf waking inside her and a destiny she did not understand. Stay here, Theron said firmly. Rest. Let your wolf settle. Do not try to shift yet, not until you have had time to adjust to her presence. The awakening can be dangerous if rushed. I will send the royal physician to check on you, make sure the process is not causing any physical harm, and I will return as soon as I can. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her. Alara, he said, using her name for the first time. Whatever happens, whatever the council says or demands, remember this. You are not alone anymore. You have me, and you have the power of your bloodline. No one will take that from you. No one will make you go back to being invisible. I swear it. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a solid thunk. Alara heard him giving orders to the guards outside, his voice muffled, but still carrying the weight of absolute authority. Then his footsteps faded. Away, and she was left alone in the Alpha King's chambers, trying to make sense of a world that had been turned completely upside down. Her wolf stirred again, and this time Alara tried to focus on the sensation instead of fighting it. The presence felt foreign, but also strangely familiar, as if it had always been there, waiting patiently for the moment it could finally emerge. She closed her eyes and tried to reach out to it mentally, the way she had heard other wolves describe communicating, with their inner beasts. At first, there was nothing but confusion, a jumble of sensations and instincts that she could not sort through. But gradually, slowly, she began to sense her wolf as a distinct entity, separate from her human consciousness, but intimately connected to it. The wolf was curious, wary, and underneath it all, furious. It had been trapped, suppressed, forced into silence for so long that awakening was both relief and rage. It wanted to run, to hunt, to claim the mate it could. Smell on every surface of this room. It wanted freedom after a lifetime of imprisonment, and it did not care about human concerns like politics or propriety, or the fact that Alara had no idea how to be anything other than a servant. Alara tried to soothe it, tried to convey that they needed to be careful, that rushing things would only cause problems. The wolf subsided reluctantly, not entirely convinced but willing to wait for now. The exchange left Alara exhausted, drained in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. She lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, and tried to process everything that had happened. She was a princess. She had a mate. She had a wolf. The words did not feel real, did not connect to anything in her experience. For 22 years, she had been nobody, nothing, barely worth noticing. How was she supposed to become someone important, someone with power and responsibility, when she had spent her entire life learning to be invisible? A soft knock at the door made her sit up quickly. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "Royal Physician Aldrich, Your Highness," a male voice answered. "The Alpha King sent me to examine you and ensure your awakening is proceeding safely." "Your Highness." The title sounded absurd applied to her, like a joke someone was playing. But Alara supposed she would need to get used to it. She was not a servant anymore, not a nobody. She was a princess, whether she felt like one or not. "Come in," she said, sitting up straighter, trying to look more composed than she felt. The door opened to reveal an elderly man with silver hair and kind eyes. He wore the robes of a healer, dark green embroidered with silver thread, and carried a leather bag that presumably held his tools and medicines. He bowed slightly when he saw her, a gesture of respect that made Alara deeply uncomfortable. "Your Highness," he said formally, "I am honored to serve you. May I approach?" Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. The physician moved closer, setting his bag down on a small table beside the bed. "The Alpha King informed me that your wolf has awakened after a lifetime of suppression," he said, his tone professional but not unkind. "This is an unusual situation, one I have never personally encountered, but the medical texts describe similar cases. The process can be dangerous if not properly managed. I need to examine you, check your vital signs, and assess whether your body is handling the transition safely. May I have your permission to proceed?" "Yes," Alara said quietly. "Please." The physician's examination was thorough, but gentle. He checked her pulse, listened to her heart and lungs, looked into her eyes with a small light, and asked her a series of questions about how she felt, what sensations she was experiencing, whether she was in pain. Alara answered as honestly as she could, describing the overwhelming flood of new senses, the presence of her wolf, the exhaustion that seemed to permeate her bones. When he asked to see the mate mark, she hesitated before rolling up her sleeve and showing him her inner forearm. The symbol was still there, still glowing faintly with silver light. The physician stared at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Remarkable," he finally said softly. "I have only seen illustrations of the lunar mark in ancient texts. To witness it in person is truly extraordinary. Does it cause you pain?" Alara shook her head. "It burns sometimes, like a brand that has not quite healed, but it is not unbearable. Mostly it just feels warm, like there is heat radiating from beneath my skin. That is normal for a newly manifested mate mark," the physician assured her. "It will settle over time, become less noticeable. The glow will fade, though the mark itself is permanent. It is a bond that cannot be broken, not by time or distance or even death. You and the Alpha King are connected now on a level that transcends the physical. You will be able to sense his emotions, his location, his well-being, and he will sense yours. Some mates develop the ability to communicate mentally, though that typically requires years of bonding and practice." The implications of that made Alara's head spin. She barely knew Theron, barely understood what being his mate meant, and now she was being told they would be connected forever, their very souls entwined. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and also strangely comforting. She had been alone her entire life, had never had anyone who truly belonged to her. Now she had a mate, someone who was bound to her by forces beyond human control, someone who had promised to protect her no matter what. It should not have mattered. She should have been angry about having her choices taken away, about being thrust into a relationship she had not chosen. But her wolf was content, happy even, purring with satisfaction at the thought of the mate waiting somewhere in the castle, and Alara found that contentment bleeding into her own emotions, making it hard to maintain her human reservations. "Your vital signs are stable," the physician said, packing up his instruments. "Your body is handling the awakening well, better than I might have expected given the circumstances. However, you need rest. The next few days will be difficult as your wolf settles and your body adjusts to the changes. You may experience mood swings, heightened emotions, increased appetite, and periods of exhaustion. All of this is normal. I will leave some herbs that will help with the transition, ease the discomfort, and help you sleep." He prepared a small packet of dried leaves and flowers, mixing them with practiced efficiency. "Brew this in hot water and drink it before you sleep. It will calm your wolf and allow your body to rest properly. Do not try to shift for at least 3 days. Your wolf is not yet stable enough, and attempting a transformation prematurely could cause serious injury. Alara accepted the packet, holding it carefully. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. The physician smiled, the expression warming his lined face. "It is my honor to serve the last princess of the lunar bloodline," he said. "Your family was greatly respected, greatly loved, before the tragedy at Moonhaven. Many of us never believed the official story, never accepted that they were traitors. To see their line restored, to know that their legacy will continue, brings hope to many who have lived in the shadow of that dark day for too long." He bowed again, deeper this time, before gathering his bag and heading for the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back at her. "Be careful, Your Highness," he said quietly. "There are those in this castle who will not be pleased by your existence, who will see you as a threat to their power and position. Trust the Alpha King, trust your instincts, and do not let anyone make you feel less than what you are. You are royalty, true royalty, and that means something even in this cynical age." Then he was gone, leaving Alara alone once more with her thoughts and her newly awakened wolf. She looked down at the mate mark on her arm, traced the glowing lines with one finger. It was beautiful and strange, a symbol of a destiny she had never imagined, never dared to dream of. She thought about Theron, about the intensity in his eyes when he looked at her, about the way he had carried her from the ceremonial hall as if she weighed nothing, as if she were precious and fragile and worth protecting. She thought about his promise to find the truth about her family's massacre, to make those responsible pay for their crimes. She barely knew him, had no reason to trust him beyond the mate bond that connected them, but something in her soul recognized him as hers, as someone who would stand between her and danger without hesitation. The door opened again, and Alara looked up, expecting to see a servant, or perhaps another guard. Instead, Martha stood in the doorway, her weathered face streaked with tears, her hands twisting in her apron. "Oh, child," the old cook said, her voice breaking. "Oh, my dear girl. I never imagined, never dreamed that you were anything more than what you seemed." Alara felt her own eyes filling with tears. She stood quickly, crossing the room to embrace the woman who had raised her, who had been the closest thing to a mother she had ever known. Martha held her tightly, her body shaking with sobs. "I should have known," Martha said into Alara's shoulder. "Your mother, when she came to me, there was something about her, something that spoke of nobility despite her worn clothes and desperate circumstances. She begged me to take you, to keep you safe, to never ask questions about where you came from. She said that your life depended on anonymity, that you must never know what you were until the time was right. I promised her I would protect you, and I tried. Truly I did. But I never understood what I was protecting you from." Alara pulled back, looking into Martha's red-rimmed eyes. "Tell me about her," she said urgently. "Please, Martha, tell me everything you remember about my mother. I need to know." Martha wiped her eyes with her apron, taking a shaky breath. "She came to the kitchens late one night, close to 23 years ago now. She was heavily pregnant, exhausted, and terrified. She said she had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. I gave her food, let her rest by the fire. She went into labor that same night, and it was difficult. So difficult. She bled too much, weakened too quickly. She knew she was dying, I think. Knew she would not survive to raise you. So she gave me the talisman, made me swear I would keep it for you until you were grown, until you needed it. She said it was your birthright, your inheritance, and that one day it would reveal the truth." Martha's voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. "She said your name was Alara, after the moon, goddess, and that you were destined for something greater than any of us could imagine. Then she made me promise one more thing. She made me swear that I would never tell you who your father was, never speak his name, because if the wrong people learned of your paternal bloodline, they would kill you without hesitation. Alara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. My father, she said slowly. She knew who he was? Did she tell you his name? Martha hesitated, fear and conflict warring on her. A face. She did, the old woman admitted. But child, some secrets are kept for good reason. Your mother died protecting that secret. Perhaps it should stay buried. Alara grabbed Martha's hands, holding them tightly. Please, she said desperately. I need to know. The Alpha King is my mate. I bear the mark of the lunar bloodline. Whatever danger my father's identity poses, I am already in the center of it. Keeping secrets now will not protect me. It will only leave me vulnerable. Martha looked at her for a long moment, then sighed, her shoulders sagging in defeat. Your mother said your father was Crown Prince Darien, she said quietly. The Alpha King's older brother, who died in the massacre at Moonhaven. The revelation hit Alara like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her mind refusing to process what she had just heard. Theron's brother. Her mate's brother was her father. That meant Theron's father, the man who had led the forces that destroyed Moonhaven, had killed his own son. Had killed his own grandchild's mother and tried to kill Alara herself. The implications were staggering, horrifying. Prince Darien was at Moonhaven? Alara asked, her voice hollow. I thought he died in battle, in the war against the rogues. Martha shook her head slowly. That was the official story, but it was a lie. Darien was in love with a woman of the lunar bloodline, a princess named Celine. He defied his father, defied the council, and went to Moonhaven to be with her. He was there when the attack came, died trying to protect her and their unborn child. But Celine escaped, fled into the wilderness, pregnant and alone. She survived long enough to give birth to you, long enough to ensure you had a chance at life, before her injuries and exhaustion claimed her. Alara sank down onto the bed, her legs unable to support her weight. Everything made a terrible kind of sense now. The suppression of her wolf, the desperate need for secrecy, the reason her mother had died, protecting her identity. She was not just a princess of the lunar bloodline. She was also a princess of the ruling bloodline, the daughter of the crown prince and heir to 2 royal houses. She was a living symbol of the unity between the bloodlines, the very thing that the massacre had been designed to prevent. Does the Alpha King know? She asked faintly. Does Theron know that his brother was my father? Martha shook her head. I do not believe so. Your mother said that Darien had kept their relationship secret from everyone except his closest confidants, and most of them died at Moonhaven. The king believed his son had been seduced and betrayed by the lunar line, that he had died because of their treachery. He never knew about you, never knew that his son had left behind a child. Alara's mind raced, trying to understand what this meant, what she should do with this information. Theron had promised to find the truth about the massacre, to discover who had orchestrated it and why. But what would he do when he learned that his own father was responsible, that the former king had killed his own son to prevent the union between the bloodlines? Would he still protect her? Or would the truth drive a wedge between them that even the mate bond could not overcome? Before she could voice any of these questions, the door burst open with enough force to make both women jump. Theron stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous, his body radiating barely contained rage. Behind him, she could hear shouting, the sounds of a confrontation that had clearly not ended well. We are leaving, he said flatly, his eyes finding Alara immediately. Now, gather whatever you need. We have minutes at most. Alara stood quickly, her heart racing. What happened? What is wrong? Theron's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in his cheek. The Supreme Counselor has demanded your immediate arrest on charges of witchcraft and deception. He claims you used dark magic to fake the lunar mark, that you are a fraud attempting to manipulate me for personal gain. Half the council supports him, and they have already sent guards to detain you. The other half is arguing for a trial, but trials can be rigged, Evidence can be manufactured. I will not risk your life on the integrity of a political process that has already failed once to protect your bloodline. Where will we go? Alara asked, trying to keep her voice steady, even as panic threatened to overwhelm her. The Northern Territory, Theron said. It is controlled by my most loyal pack, people I trust with my life. We will be safe there while I consolidate power and deal with the traitors on the council. But we need to leave now, before they can organize a pursuit. He looked at Martha, and his expression softened slightly. You have been good to her, he said. For that, you have my gratitude and my protection. Go back to the kitchens. Act as if you know nothing. Do not let anyone know that you told her about her parents. If they suspect you have information, they will use you to get to her. Martha nodded, squeezing Alara's hand one last time. Be safe, child, she whispered. Be strong. You are more than they think, more than even you know. Your mother and father gave their lives for love and for you. Do not let their sacrifice be in vain. Then she was gone, hurrying out of the room before anyone could stop her. Theron moved to Alara's side, his hand finding hers, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that felt both natural and startling. Trust me, he said quietly, his dark eyes boring into hers. I know you have no reason to. Know that everything is happening too fast, and you do not have time to process any of it. But I swear to you, on my life and my honor, I will keep you safe. You are my mate, my responsibility, and I do not fail to protect what is mine. Alara looked at him, at this man who was a stranger, and yet connected to her on a level she barely understood, and made a decision. She could stay, could try to face the council, could attempt to prove her legitimacy through political maneuvering and legal processes. But Martha's warning echoed in her mind. There were people in this castle who wanted her dead, who would not rest until the lunar bloodline was truly extinct. Staying meant putting her trust in systems that had already failed her family once. Going with Theron meant putting her trust in him, in the mate bond, in the promise he had made. It was not really a choice at all. I trust you, she said, and was surprised to find that she meant it. Something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been relief or gratitude or simply satisfaction. He nodded once, then led her toward the door, toward whatever future awaited them beyond the walls of the castle. As they moved through the corridors, Alara could hear the sounds of pursuit growing closer. Guards shouting orders, feet pounding on stone. But Theron seemed to know every secret. Passage, every hidden route through the castle. He guided her with the confidence of someone who had spent his entire life learning these halls, preparing for the day when he might need to move unseen. They emerged into the night air through a small door hidden behind a tapestry in the lower levels of the castle. The moon was high and full, bathing everything in silver light, appropriate for someone of the lunar bloodline. Theron led her to where two horses waited, already saddled, already prepared for a swift departure. He had planned for this, Alara realized. Had anticipated that the council might move against her, had prepared an escape route just in case. It spoke to his tactical mind, his ability to think several steps ahead, and also to his determination to protect her no matter what obstacles arose. He lifted her onto one of the horses with effortless strength, then mounted the other with practiced ease. Stay close to me, he commanded. Do not fall behind, no matter what happens. We ride hard and fast until we reach the northern border. Once we cross into my territory, you will be under the protection of my personal guard, and no council decree will be able to touch you. Alara nodded, gripping the reins tightly. She had ridden horses before. Part of her duties had involved taking messages to the outlying farms, but never like this, never at speed through the darkness with pursuit behind them. Theron kicked his horse into motion, and Alara's mount followed. Automatically, trained to stay close to the lead stallion. They galloped through the night, leaving the castle and its treachery behind them. As they rode, Alara felt her wolf rise up inside her, responding to the freedom, to the speed, to the thrill of the chase. It wanted to shift, wanted to run on 4 legs instead of being confined to horseback. But Alara remembered the physician's warning. She was not ready for a full transformation, not yet. She needed time to adjust, to learn control, to understand what it meant to have a wolf inside her consciousness. So she held on, focused on staying in the saddle, on keeping pace with Theron, on trusting that he would lead them to safety. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit gradually faded as the distance grew. Theron's plan was working. They were escaping, leaving behind the council's plots and Vivian's ambitions and the dangerous politics of the royal court. But even as relief began to seep into Alara's awareness, she knew this was far from over. The revelation of her heritage had set events in motion that could not be stopped, had made her a target for forces she did not yet understand. The mate bond connected her to Theron, but it also connected her to his responsibilities, his enemies, his complicated history. She was no longer just Alara the servant, invisible and unimportant. She was Princess Alara of the lunar bloodline, mate to the Alpha King. And whether she was ready or not, she would have to learn to navigate a world of power and danger that she had never been prepared for. The moon continued to shine overhead, constant and eternal, a reminder of the bloodline she carried, the destiny she had been born to fulfill. And as they rode through the night toward an uncertain future, Alara felt something shift inside her, a resolve hardening into determination. She had spent her entire life being powerless, being overlooked, being told she was nothing. But the fire had revealed the truth, and the mark on her arm proclaimed it to anyone who could see. She was not nothing. She was a princess, a wolf, a force that those who had tried to destroy her family had failed to eliminate. And with the Alpha King at her side, and her wolf waking inside her soul, she would not be powerless anymore. She would fight for her place, for her heritage, for the future that had been stolen from her family. The journey was just beginning, and whatever challenges lay ahead, Alara was ready to face them. She had thrown the Talisman into the fire expecting to lose everything. Instead, she had found herself, had found her mate, had found a destiny worth fighting for. And she would not let anyone take that away from her, not without a fight. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming?